Hello everyone. So in this video we are going to discuss about important conventions with respect to climate change. So in the previous video we have discussed about what is climate change, what is global warming, what are greenhouse gas effect, what are different types of greenhouse gases, etc. So if you have not seen that video, please go and see that video and then come to this video, because this particular video is in continuation of that video. So in this video, we are going to discuss about important international conventions with respect to climate change. So the most important conference which we are having is what? United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, which happened in Rio de Janeiro, which is located in Brazil. तो ये एक्चुअली हुआ था आपकी 14th जून 1992 को, और इस पर्टिकुलर समिट को रियो डे जेनेरियो अर्थ समिट भी बोलते हैं, रियो समिट भी बोलते हैं, रियो कॉन्फ्रेंस एंड अर्थ समिट भी बोलते हैं. अर्थ समिट इसलिए बोलते हैं बिकॉज इन दिस पर्टिकुलर समिट वी हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट फॉर द प्रोटेक्शन और द कंजर्वेशन ऑफ दिस एंटायर अर्थ and what are the different ways through which we can have this sustainable earth. So that is why we also call this particular conference as Earth Summit, right? आपको याद यहाँ पे ये रखना है कि ये हुआ कब था. So this happened in 1992 and the place is Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. Okay, so almost 172 government participants were there. So what were the different issues that were addressed during this particular summit? So basically it talked about systematic examination of industrial processes, because we all know कि जो हम industrial processes जो होती हैं उसमें बहुत तरह के toxic material जो है वो use होते हैं, right? तो उनका examination करना बहुत ही important है. For example, we add lead to petroleum, right? We have different types of radioactive compounds that we use, right? So इन सारी चीजों को examine करना बहुत ही important है. So these were the issues that were addressed during this Rio summit. Again, we have this alternative energy sources, then increasing reliance on public transit networks, and again we have discussed about this growing scarcity of water, right? So what were the outcomes with respect to this Earth Summit? आपको यहाँ पे तीन चीजें याद रखनी है कि इस अर्थ समिट के तीन आउटकम थे, मेजर आउटकम्स थे, which includes Rio Declaration on Environment and Development. Then we have this Agenda 21. So now what you have to remember is that this Agenda 21 is non-binding action plan for sustainable development. So whenever we are talking about sustainable development, we mean that we are fulfilling the needs of the present generation, as well as we are keeping in the mind the need of future generation, right? इसका ये मतलब है कि हम फिलहाल जो नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज यूज कर रहे हैं उसको हम बहुत रिस्पॉन्सिबल तरीके से यूज करें, सो दैट कि इसका ओवर कंजम्पशन या ओवर एक्सप्लॉयटेशन या मिस यूज ना हो, राइट? हम उसको बिल्कुल एफिशिएंटली यूटिलाइज करें और ऐसे यूटिलाइज करें ताकि जो हमारी फ्यूचर जनरेशन है, जो आने वाली जनरेशन है, वो भी उस रिसोर्स को यूटिलाइज कर पाए. Okay, so this basically talks about action and plan for sustainable development. So this Agenda 21 is nothing but this 21 represents the 21st century. तो आपकी ऐसे क्या क्या एजेंडाज होंगे 21st century में जो कि contribute करेंगे किसमें? Sustainable development में. So this was Agenda 21. Then we had this forest principles. So this global non-legally binding consensus थी. इसमें ये बोला गया था कि we are going to protect, manage and do the sustainable development of all types of forest. So it was basically not talking about any particular forest, it was talking about all types of forest. So these were the three major outcome of this Earth Summit. Okay, now important point here is that these were non-legally binding, right? ये non-legally binding थे. अब हमारे पास क्या है? हमारे पास टू इम्पॉर्टेंट लीगली बाइंडिंग अग्रीमेंट्स थे जो कि आपके रियो समिट से आए थे. सो वन इंक्लूड योर कन्वेंशन ऑन बायोलॉजिकल डाइवर्सिटी, देन यू हैव दिस यूनाइटेड नेशन फ्रेमवर्क Convention on Climate Change. So this UNFCCC. So here in this video we are focusing on UNFCCC. क्यों? क्योंकि हम लोग क्लाइमेट चेंज की बात कर रहे हैं, तो बायोलॉजिकल डाइवर्सिटी की बात अभी हम नहीं करेंगे, हम सिर्फ फोकस करेंगे क्लाइमेट चेंज पे और उससे रिलेटेड इंपॉर्टेंट कन्वेंशंस पे. ओके, सो UNFCCC बेसिकली ये डिसाइड किया गया था कि हर साल सारी पार्टीज जो हैं, those parties which are member of this particular organization, we are going to meet together and we'll have this conference of party each and every year. So in this video we are discussing the important conference that has happened in the past. क्योंकि सारी कॉन्फ्रेंस पढ़ने का कोई फायदा नहीं है, आपको इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्फ्रेंसेस ही हैं जो आपको याद होनी चाहिए. So for example, this Kyoto Protocol was a very important conference of party, it was a conference of party third that happened in 1997. Okay, and it entered into force on 16th Feb 2005. So this talks about binding emission reduction for 37 industrialized country. So when we are saying industrialized country, it means developed countries, those countries which are already industrialized. ठीक है, जिन्होंने काफी सारे emissions कर चुके हैं आपकी environment में. Okay, and it also talks about common but differentiated responsibility. Okay, so now see, होता क्या है, we all are living in this global podium, global platform. So we all are responsible for emitting whatever into the atmosphere, right? वो greenhouse gases हैं या फिर जो भी चीजें हम emit कर रहे हैं, so we all are responsible, right? But ये जो common but differentiated responsibility है, this talks about differences in responsibility. Why? Because this industrialized countries, the developed countries, they have already emitted lots of emissions or lots of greenhouse gases into the environment. Okay, as compared to developing countries or अंडरडेवलप्ड कंट्रीज. तो ऑब्वियस सी बात है, जिन लोगों ने बहुत ज्यादा एमिट किया है, बहुत ज्यादा हार्म किया है एनवायरनमेंट को, उन लोगों के पास रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ज्यादा होनी चाहिए क्लाइमेट चेंज में कंट्रीब्यूट करने में, राइट? या फिर जो एमिशंस को रिड्यूस करने में उनकी कंट्रीब्यूशन ज्यादा होनी चाहिए एज कंपेयर टू these developing countries or underdeveloped countries. So this is basically common but differentiated responsibilities. That is that we all have this common responsibility to protect this environment and to reduce the emission. But at the same time, those countries who have emitted much more amount of greenhouse gases, they should be responsible more for eliminating or mitigating the effect of greenhouse gases. Okay, so this was also discussed in this Kyoto Protocol. So what was the target that was given to them, to the industrialized countries? That average 5% emissions reduction compared to 1990 level over 5 years. ठीक है, तो उनको ये बोला गया कि we are giving you this much of target to reduce this much of emission from the environment. Okay, और उनका जो फर्स्ट फेज था that started from 2008 to 2012. So they were given this time period of 2008 to 2012. और ये भी बोला गया है in case if you are not fulfilling this target you will be penalized. ठीक है, एडिशनल आपको ज्यादा चार्ज किया जाएगा और एडिशनल आपको टारगेट दिया जाएगा for the reduction in the greenhouse gases. Okay, so this KP has, that is Kyoto Protocol, has three important mechanism, which includes your flexible market mechanism, emission reduction commitment, as well as compliance system. Okay, so this flexible market mechanism again has three subdivisions. So when we are talking about this flexible, it means that something which is flexible in nature, it is not rigid in nature. Okay, इसका ये मतलब है कि आपके पास दो तीन options हैं कि आप एलिमिनेट करो, मिटिगेट करो, रिड्यूस करो जो कार्बन एमिशंस हैं आपकी इन्वायरमेंट में. तो ये दो तीन आपके पास ऑप्शन है. यू कैन ऑप्ट एनी ऑफ दीज थ्री ऑप्शंस एंड यू कैन गो फॉर इट. सो इन फ्लेक्सिबल मार्केट मैकेनिज्म वी हैव दिस ज्वाइंट इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, क्लीन डेवलपमेंट मैकेनिज्म एंड एमिशन ट्रेडिंग. सो ज्वाइंट इम्प्लीमेंटेशन अगर मैं आपको बिल्कुल सिंपल भाषा में समझाऊं तो अगर कोई डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज है और उनको कुछ टारगेट मिला हुआ है that you have to reduce this much of carbon emission to the environment, so what they will do, they will try to invest in those projects, or you can say emission reduction or emission removal project in some other developed countries. ठीक है, to achieve their target. ठीक है, मतलब एक डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज दूसरी डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज में इन्वेस्ट कर रही है in those projects which are emission reduction or emission removal projects. So in this way one country will be able to achieve their target which they have been assigned. So this is basically joint implementation. आपको याद ये रखना है, in joint implementation developed countries investing in developed countries. ठीक है, ये ध्यान रखना है. Now we have this clean development mechanism. So in this clean development mechanism, one developed country is investing in some other developing countries. ठीक है, एक डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज है वो किस में इन्वेस्ट कर रही है, एक डेवलपिंग कंट्री में इन्वेस्ट कर रही है. अगेन इन द सेम प्रोजेक्ट विच इज रिलेटेड टू एमिशन रिडक्शन प्रोजेक्ट और एमिशन रिमूवल प्रोजेक्ट फ्रॉम द environment. So in joint implementation, developed countries in the developed countries, but in clean development mechanism, one developed countries to other developing countries. Okay, then we have emission trading. So basically emission trading क्या होता है कि suppose if you have assigned some certain targets and you have achieved your target and you have overachieved your target. For example, आपको 2 tons of carbon dioxide remove करने के लिए बोला गया था environment से. So now you have removed this 4 tons of carbon dioxide. So जो 2 additional tons of carbon dioxide which you have overachieved, that you can sell or trade in the global market. तो उसको हम लोग कार्बन मार्केट भी बोलते हैं. That one countries who has overachieved its target of Kyoto Protocol can sell their credit to the other countries who have underachieved or have not achieved their own target. So this is basically emission trading. Okay, so within this UNFCCC we have one funding mechanism, that is Green Environment Fund. So in Article 11 of UNFCCC you have this financial mechanism for this particular convention implementation. So this Green Environment Fund, it just not focuses on climate change, it has some other area in its domain which includes your biodiversity projects, then your international water land degradation projects, POP projects, mercury, sustainable forest management, food security, sustainable cities, etc. So ये इन सारे projects जो भी ये सारे areas मैंने discuss बताए आपको, इन सब से related वो funding कर सकता है. Who? Green Environment Fund. Okay, so this GEF is also a financial mechanism for all these different types of conventions, which includes your CBD, UNFCCC, UNCCD, Stockholm Convention, Minamata Convention. Okay, so UNCCD, that is United Nations Convention to combat desertification, is again a very important topic. We will discuss it in next video. Okay. So now some of the important COPs that we'll discuss. First we have discussed about Kyoto Protocol. Now this Copenhagen Summit in 2009. So this was basically COP 15. So this particular conference of parties discussed about that developed countries must pledge certain amount of money for the financing of these types of all those projects which are related to reduction or removal of climate change, right? So developed countries pledge up to USD 30 billion in fast start finance for the period 2010 and 2012. Then we have this COP 16 जिसको कि कैनकुन समिट भी बोलते हैं. Again this Cancun summit is very very important. आपको याद यहाँ ये रखना है कि this particular summit resulted into 3 most important outcomes which includes your Green Climate Fund. ओके आपको कंफ्यूज नहीं होना है ग्रीन इन्वायरमेंट फंड और ग्रीन क्लाइमेट फंड से. ग्रीन क्लाइमेट फंड जो है दैट वाज द आउटकम ऑफ योर कैनकुन समिट, राइट? एंड अगेन यू हैव दिस टेक्नोलॉजी मैकेनिज्म एंड कैनकुन एडेप्टेशन फ्रेमवर्क. तो ये 3 चीजें जो है वो आउटकम थी किसकी? वो आपकी आउटकम थी COP 16 की. Then again COP 17 जो डरबन में हुई. This particular summit talks about the government's commitment to a new universal climate change agreement by 2015 for the period beyond 2020. तो 2020 के बाद हमारी क्या टारगेट होंगी, हमारा क्या प्लान होगा, तो ये पर्टिकुलर समिट जो हुई थी इसमें इस बात को डिस्कस किया गया. एंड इन दैट पर्टिकुलर समिट ओनली वी केम इनटू कंक्लूजन दैट वी विल हैव दिस Paris Agreement of 2015 for further discussing about our whole plan beyond 2020. Okay, then we have this COP 18 that happened Doha. So जो Kyoto Protocol था उसका फर्स्ट फेज एंड हुआ था आपकी कब हुआ था? 2008 से 2012 में. ठीक है, तो 2012 में फर्स्ट फेज जो है दैट वाज एंडेड. सो नेक्स्ट फेज क्या होगा इस पर्टिकुलर दोहा समिट में डिस्कस किया गया था. Sorry. So COP 18 also launched a second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. Now COP 21, the most important this particular COP happened in Paris, that was COP 21. So this particular summit talks about that every nation should have some intended nationally determined contribution. मतलब जितनी भी countries हैं जो members हैं उनके पास कुछ intended nationally determined contribution होना चाहिए, that they must pledge certain promises that they will reduce certain amount of CO2 from the environment, and what steps as a government they will take to reduce this greenhouse gas emissions into the environment. So this was very very important. और इसके कुछ aims थे जो COP 21 हुआ था, इसमें काफी सारे aim लिए गए थे. For example, it to keep the global temperature well below 2 degree Celsius above pre-industrial time. So जो pre-industrial time है this is 1850. तो जो एक बेस ईयर लिया गया है that is 1850. So it says that to keep global temperature well below 2 degree Celsius and endeavor to limit them even more 1 to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Okay, so rich countries should also help poorer nations by providing climate finances to adapt to climate change. The agreement requires rich nations to maintain $100 billion a year funding pledge beyond 2020. And also, which we have already mentioned, that it also talks about intended nationally determined contribution. तो इंडिया से, क्योंकि हम इंडिया में हैं, तो हमारी क्या intended nationally determined contribution थी, it becomes very important for us to understand or to know this, right? तो हमारी कुछ pledges थी which includes reduce emission intensity by 33 to 35% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. तो आपको ये ध्यान रखना है कि हमने ये प्लेज किया है कि 33 to 35% हम रिड्यूस करेंगे from 2005 level by 2030. Then we have also pledged that we will have this installation capacity of 175 gigawatt of solar, wind and biomass electricity by 2022 and scale up further in the following years. Then we also have this target of 63 gigawatt of installed nuclear power capacity by 2032. And we also had this pledge that we'll have achieve 40% of cumulative electric power from renewable sources of energy. And we also pledged that we'll have additional carbon sink. Carbon sink आप कैसे create कर सकते हो? बहुत सारे forest को build करके, then wetlands को manage करके and etc. So create an additional carbon sink. Sink क्यों create करते हैं? That so that it can store a huge amount of carbon into it, right? तो जो plants होती हैं, जो trees होती हैं, जो forest होती हैं, वो बहुत major carbon sinks हैं. So create an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2030, right? So in that particular summit जो COP21 हुई है पेरिस में, उसके साथ साथ ही we had this international solar alliance. So it was basically a joint effort of India's Prime Minister, that is प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी and फ्रांस प्रेसिडेंट. ओके, तो उन दोनों के ज्वाइंट कोलैबोरेशन से ही उस टाइम पे इसको लॉन्च किया गया था, इंटरनेशनल सोलर अलायंस. एंड आवर प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी हैज यूज्ड वन टर्म, दैट इज सौर्यपुत्रा. तो सौर्यपुत्रा इज बेसिकली दोज कंट्रीज, ऐसी कंट्रीज जहां पे की जो सोलर लाइट है, जो सन की लाइट है, वो बहुत ज्यादा अवेलेबल है. Obviously, those countries which are coming in between your Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, so these are basically your solar putras or Sauryaputras, right? तो initially इसमें वैसे ही countries involved थे. Only those countries were part of it which were partly or wholly belong to Tropic of Cancer or Tropic of Capricorn area. But now this alliance is open to all type of country. तो अब ऐसी कोई बाउंडेशन नहीं है कि सिर्फ वही कंट्रीज इसके मेंबर होंगे जो कि ट्रॉपिक ऑफ कैंसर और ट्रॉपिक ऑफ कैप्रिकॉर्न के अंदर आ रहे होंगे. कोई भी कंट्रीज जो है वो उसका पार्ट बन सकती है. एंड इट हैड 121 सिग्नेटरी कंट्रीज एट दैट टाइम. It was committed to have action-oriented, member-driven, collaborative platform for increased deployment of solar energy technologies. और also जो हमारी solar energy technologies होगी वो cost-effective होगी, transformational होगी, right? So again we have this COP22, that is Marrakesh. The crucial outcome was that we must be having a rule book of Paris Agreement. आपने decide तो बहुत कुछ कर लिया पेरिस में कि ये भी करना है, ये भी करना है, but for that you must be having one particular rule book. तो उसके लिए ये Marrakesh जो COP22 हुई है, that is important. And this also launched the Marrakesh Partnership for Climate Change. So the most recent one is Glasgow Summit that happened in COP26. This summit targeted global warming not to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius and go about 140 countries to announce target dates for bringing emissions down to net zero. So whenever we are talking about net zero, it actually means कि जितनी भी कार्बन आप emit कर रहे हो, the amount of carbon or any type of greenhouse gases that you are emitting into the environment, it should be equal to the amount which you are absorbing from the environment. ठीक है, तो आप कुछ additional नहीं डाल रहे हो एनवायरनमेंट में, आप जितना एमिट कर रहे हो उतना ही एब्जॉर्ब कर रहे हो. ठीक है, दैट इज नेट जीरो. तो इंडिया ने भी अपना टारगेट ये दिया है दैट इंडिया हैज गिवन द नेट जीरो टारगेट ऑफ 2070. मतलब ये कि 2070 तक हम जितनी भी कार्बन एमिट करेंगे एनवायरनमेंट में उतनी ही हमारी कैपेसिटी होगी दैट विल एब्जॉर्ब दिस कार्बन फ्रॉम द एनवायरनमेंट. So this was basically a net zero target of 2070 by India. So India also suggested a middle path calling for phase down of coal based power. Okay. So now let's do certain questions. जो कुछ questions मैंने पहले वाले वीडियो से भी लिए हैं. So please let me know your answer in the comment box. So the first question is, which of the following are true about India's INDC? So reduce emission intensity by 33 to 35% of GDP of 1990 level by 2030. 40% of cumulative electric power installed from non-fossil fuel based energy resources by 2030, and to create additional carbon sink. ये क्वेश्चन आपको अटेम्प्ट करना है. देन यू हैव सेकंड क्वेश्चन विच टॉक्स अबाउट विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग आर नॉन ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस. सो दिस इंक्लूड्स नाइट्रस ऑक्साइड, ओजोन एंड सल्फर डाइऑक्साइड. तो आपको ये बताना है कि इसमें से कौन सी नॉन ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस नहीं है. राइट, दिस इज द लास्ट क्वेश्चन. It is about transport sector is largest contributor to GHG emissions. CO2 concentration is higher than any other GHG. So this is all about today's, guys. So let's meet you in next video. Please do the revision and have a nice day.